So what do you do after experiencing a spiritual / non-dual awakening? I'm going to share this analogy with you in the hopes to explain what needs to be done. So for a second, imagine you are in this dark room and you've spent all your life in this dark room and it's all you ever know. There is no doors, no windows, nothing. It's just pitch black darkness. And so what you do after some time being there, you start to question why you are here, what this is all about. You try to really get to the source, turn yourself around and ask, who is witnessing? Who is observing? Who am I? This may be a particular path. You may actually just walk around, wander in the room, fall over an obstacle, smash your head, and then all of a sudden you wake up. Now the awakening that takes place in this case is a light. A light is suddenly switched on in the room. You realize that as you tripped over, you smashed your head, your hand landed on the light switched on the wall, switched the light on, the room is filled with light, you are now able to see what's going on. And what you see is a huge mess. But since the light has been switched on, you also feel a tremendous relief, a sense of liberation, something that you've always wanted. Because all of a sudden there's clarity and you are able to see. You may not necessarily like what you see, but the clarity or the peace that you now feel far outweighs whether you like or dislike what you are seeing in the room. Now after some time, you may get distracted again, and what you are now seeing in this room, which is a whole load of rubbish, a mess, obstacles, loads of suffering, trauma, memories. After some time, when this gets the best of you, you may decide to switch the light off. So now you are back in this darkness, but you also deep down know that the mess is still there and it needs to be dealt with. But you just don't feel ready because you don't want to revisit all the bags of rubbish, the bin bags filled with the trauma that you've just accumulated over time, thrown it in the corner, and you just don't want to deal with it anymore. So after some time, you actually decide, no, this is it. I need to deal with this stuff. You switch the light back on and you slowly start with picking up the bag that is nearest to you. This bag is full of past memories, full of trauma, a heartbreak. It's full of addictions maybe. Something that is really acting as an obstacle in allowing you to maneuver around this room or life, for instance. And so you say, that's it. I need to pick this bag up and I need to clean it out. I need to put it in a bin. There's a hatch in the wall. You could put the bag in the bin. But the problem is when you pick up that bag, the bag may rip. It may leak. And so all of a sudden you are re-experiencing everything that's been accumulated in this bag. This trauma, this memory. And when the bag leaks, you feel as though it's happening all over again. And you're like, no, I don't want to revisit this. But you decide to persevere. You decide to pick up this bag. It may leak, it may rip. You throw it down this hatch. You experience the fullness of what is in this bag. And you are okay with it. There's a sense of mercy that the light shining in the room is bringing to you, a sense of peace, and you abide in that peace. You choose to abide in that peace regardless of the trauma that you are feeling. And so you also bring a brush, you pick up what's fallen on the floor, and you deal with that as well. There is no more remnants of that memory, this traumatizing memory. And once it's dealt with, when you do think back about it again, it's okay. It's absolutely fine. And you do the same with the rest of the things, or the rubbish, let's just say, that's been accumulated in the room. You carry on, you carry on. And then there's also a carpet. You've, put a lot of stuff underneath the carpet, which you keep tripping over every now and then. But after some time, the room is clean, it's pristine. And you can just walk around, and eventually you can jump around, skip around in this room. And there's a sense of liberation that is unfelt. Sometimes though, over time, some rubbish may accumulate again, but this time, it goes straight into the hatch. It's dealt with immediately. And so in this way, the room is maintained. You don't necessarily have to go through a huge deep clean again because you are maintaining the cleanliness in this room. So this analogy is an analogy I came up with to show and point towards what needs to be done after a spiritual / non-dual awakening. And in essence, yes, you have this glimpse of liberation. Yes, you now see. You've realized the true self. You've seen through the illusion of the separate self, but you can very easily fall back into the illusion because you have not reconciled with the remnants that are in the body or in the mind. And these can come in so many different forms. They can come in the form of memories, previous trauma, so strong, so binding to a strong emotion, and in addition, linked to a very powerful belief system. So there's this feedback loop. This trauma that you have felt in the past has somehow shaped your character in a way. And you are now protecting this character from reconciling with this trauma, because this trauma has now given you a sense of identity somehow. But it also doesn't take long to realize that this sense of identity is not serving you either. But with this light, with this flash of light that fills all these dark crevices within yourself, all these dark parts of yourself, you are able to see, hey, this is something that needs to be dealt with. This past painful moment that just keeps coming back to me, this is something that needs to be dealt with. And the way you deal with it is you embrace it. A previous heartbreak, a lost one, a childhood trauma, you name it. You embrace it, whatever it may be. And whatever it may be, you can always come up with a good justification as to why you should not revisit it, and why you should not embrace it, and why you should not forgive, why there shouldn't be mercy. But forgiveness and mercy and embracing, this is all for you to liberate yourself from the previous trauma, let's say. And so you revisit it and you embrace it with arms wide open, as though you are embracing a very happy moment in your life, also with arms wide open. And so eventually you experience the depth. You put yourself in a position and you are like, okay, I am going to experience the depth of this pain that I am feeling right now. I'm going to dive straight in. I want to get to the bottom of this and feel it. And eventually, naturally, it just dissolves. What keeps these moments or these traumatic memories intact is the resistance to dealing with them, to observing them. And so once you've decided, I'm going to fully embrace this, there is no more resistance. And so it loses its power and eventually it just dissolves. You are not resisting happiness and joy in your life. That's why eventually it subsides. So in this way, we've got to look at also other situations. So I've spoken about traumatic memories in the past that have happened. There are also certain anxieties, projections that we create in the mind in terms of what may happen in the future. These can then hold themselves in a belief system, and it's something that we really don't want to look forward to. It still inevitably happen. We may have this strong conviction that this particular thing will inevitably happen in the future, and we are trying to avoid it and numb ourselves from it. But all we are doing in avoiding a created projection, imagination of what may happen in the future, we are sacrificing what's happening now. We are sacrificing being here now. And so if we get to the bottom of these scenarios that we have projected the same way we are getting to the bottom of the previous traumatic memories we have had, eventually what happens, these two will subside. They lose leverage. They dissolve. And then you have other things that just keep you bound, such as addictions. An addiction could be your typical addiction, like overeating, smoking, whatever it may be. Or it could be something that isn't typically labeled as an addiction. It could be something as simple as scratching a particular part of your arm, or biting your nails. Well, biting your nails is a typical one, I guess, but just scratching a particular part or playing with a certain part, which, if you notice, with that light shining in the room, you are able to notice that you always refer back to this particular itch or this particular habit, micro habit that you do, simply because you are feeling in a particular way. There's some form of anxiety, there's some form of development of stress, something's taking place. And so you observe this, and eventually that too reconciles. So what you are to do is to use that light, use the bright light of awareness that you now recognize, seeps through all your entire existence, seeps through the entirety of your being. And you look at places that can be cleaned up. And it's so joyful when you are in a place where you can just skip around in happiness, in joy. Eventually you'll find yourself in a place where you look forward to recognizing something that can be reconciled. You look forward to recognizing, hey, this is a trapped emotion or a trapped addiction or whatever it may be that I can deal with right now, because you know you're creating space. You sit down and you create space. And then eventually there's just not much anymore. It comes to a point where maybe once a week you might find something that triggers you or annoys you, some sort of psychological habit, some sort of typical reaction that you take when someone says something, whatever it may be. You might have these once a week, and then eventually once every 2 weeks, and then once a month, and then eventually they just aren't anymore. They just aren't anymore. There is just light, just pure liberation. And it's felt deep in the body. The body feels at rest. There is literally no physical tensions in the body that you feel anymore. Very often when people, and I have fallen victim to this, when I experience in the past a glimpse or a spiritual awakening, what then happens is like, wow, I see now, I understand now. But then you fall back into the habits of the old ways of living. And then you find yourself in a loop of suffering. The suffering may be may have less weight than before. The suffering may be short-lived, but there is still a lot of suffering taking place. You still find yourself entangled in the narrative and the story. But when you rest in being, in the light of being, when you reconcile with all of these obstacles in the dirt that may dim the light of being, well, the light can never be dimmed, but it may be covered. Cover the light of being. What you'd like to do is just reconcile with all of these obstacles. I kind of lost my train of thought there. But you get the point, I hope. Face it head on. Embrace it fully, like you would embrace a small child who's just tripped over, scratched their knee, that's bleeding now, and you tell them it's okay. That is the way you want to embrace every single one of these traumatic experiences that you may have had in the past. The addictions, the projections, all of it. Liberate yourself. I love you. Thank you so much for watching. This is Hassan from the Spiritual Walks, and we are all on a journey towards the truth.